The restaurant hummed with life, its lavish interiors buzzing with the quiet clatter of cutlery and the low murmur of conversations. Waiters glided between tables, their movements smooth and precise, catering to the well-dressed diners who seemed to carry an air of importance. The faint aroma of freshly baked bread and rich sauces wafted through the space, a testament to the restaurant's reputation as one of the city's finest. At the entrance, a modestly dressed older woman stepped inside. Her outfit was simple yet clean, her posture upright, and her eyes calm but observant. She paused for a moment, scanning the room for a table. A hostess approached her, her polite smile tinged with hesitation, as if unsure whether this woman belonged here. After a brief exchange, the woman was led to a small table near the window, far from the bustling center of activity. Seated alone, she quietly unfolded the menu, her fingers tracing the edge of the page as she browsed the options. Her demeanor was composed, but the occasional glance from nearby diners betrayed their curiosity. Some seemed indifferent, while others exchanged whispers, their eyes flicking toward her before returning to their companions. The waiter assigned to her table approached, his steps brisk, but his expression less than welcoming. He was a young man, dressed sharply in the restaurant's uniform, with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Good evening," he said, his tone perfunctory. "What can I get for you?" The woman looked up, her gentle smile unshaken by his lack of warmth. "I'll have a cup of tea to start, please," she said softly. "And maybe a moment to decide on the rest?" The waiter raised an eyebrow, his lips curving into a faint smirk. "Tea?" he repeated, as if the request were unusual. "This isn't a cafe, ma'am. Most people come here for more substantial meals." The woman met his gaze without flinching. "I'm aware," she said evenly, "but I'd like some tea, if that's all right." The waiter hesitated, then shrugged. "Very well," he said, turning sharply on his heel and walking away. His muttered comment as he passed another waiter was barely audible, but unmistakable. "What's she even doing here?" The older woman heard him, but chose not to react. Instead, she sat quietly, gazing out of the window as the city lights began to flicker against the evening sky. Her presence remained understated, yet there was an undeniable strength in her silence. The waiter returned a few moments later with a small pot of tea and a cup, setting them down on the table with a clink that bordered on dismissive. "Here you go," he said curtly. "Anything else?" The woman poured herself a cup, her movements unhurried. "I'll have the soup of the day," she said. "Thank you." The waiter's expression soured slightly. "You know, the portions here aren't small," he said, his tone laced with condescension. "You might find it a bit pricey." The woman's gaze lifted to meet his, her calm eyes now holding a hint of steel. "I'll manage," she replied simply. The waiter lingered for a moment, as if expecting a different reaction. When none came, he walked away, muttering under his breath once again. The diners at nearby tables began to whisper louder, their curiosity piqued by the quiet exchange. Unbeknownst to them, and to the waiter, the evening was about to take a dramatic turn. The woman's calm exterior concealed a connection that would soon leave everyone in the restaurant stunned. The woman sipped her tea slowly, her gaze fixed on the window. She seemed unbothered by the stares and whispers around her, as though she had weathered such moments countless times before. Her quiet confidence was unshaken, though the tension in the room was palpable. At a nearby table, a group of diners exchanged knowing glances. One man, dressed in a tailored suit, leaned toward his companion and whispered, "What's she doing in a place like this?" "Looks like she wandered in by mistake." His companion chuckled softly, shaking her head. Maybe she doesn't realize how expensive it is, she replied, her voice just loud enough to be overheard by the nearby tables. The waiter returned with the soup, placing it on the table with little care. The bowl clinked loudly against the plate, and the edge of the spoon nearly tipped over the side. He straightened, his tone clipped as he said, "Here you go, ma'am. Enjoy." The woman nodded politely, her composure intact. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. But the waiter lingered, his irritation now evident. "You know," he said, his tone laced with condescension, "a place like this isn't exactly casual dining. People come here for the experience, for the ambiance. It's not just about the food." The woman paused, her spoon hovering over the bowl. She looked up at him, her expression calm, but unyielding. "I see," she said softly. "And do you think I don't belong here?" The waiter hesitated, his confidence faltering for the first time. "I didn't mean it like that," he muttered, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I just think you might be more comfortable somewhere. Simpler." A hush fell over the nearby tables, the waiter's words cutting through the air like a blade. The woman's gaze didn't waver, but the slightest hint of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Thank you for your concern," she said, her voice measured. "But I'll be fine." Before the waiter could respond, the door to the restaurant swung open. A tall, unassuming man in a simple suit walked in, his presence subtle yet commanding. The room seemed to shift as heads turned toward him, the hum of conversation softening to a whisper. Warren Buffett had arrived. He scanned the room briefly before his eyes landed on the woman near the window. His expression softened instantly, and a warm smile spread across his face. Without hesitation, he made his way toward her table, weaving through the maze of diners who now stared openly. "Darling," Warren said as he reached the table, his voice filled with affection. He leaned down to kiss the woman on the cheek, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "Sorry I'm late. I hope you didn't wait too long." The room froze. The waiter's face drained of color as realization dawned. This wasn't just any woman. This was Warren Buffett's wife. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. The waiter stood frozen, his earlier arrogance replaced with a mix of shock and dread. Nearby diners exchanged wide-eyed glances, their whispered judgments now replaced by quiet murmurs of disbelief. Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest and most respected men in the world, was standing there, casually addressing the woman they had all underestimated. The woman looked up at Warren, her calm demeanor unchanged. "You're just in time," she said with a faint smile. "I've been enjoying some tea." Warren smiled warmly, pulling out the chair across from her. He sat down and adjusted his jacket before turning his gaze toward the waiter, who was still standing stiffly by the table. "I assume my wife's been well taken care of?" Warren asked, his voice calm, but with an undertone that sent a chill through the room. The waiter stammered, his face flushing red. Yes, sir," he managed to say, though his voice wavered. "Of course, sir. I didn't realize she was your—" Warren raised a hand, cutting him off. "It shouldn't matter who she is," he said firmly, his tone now sharper. "Every person who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with respect. Isn't that what your job is about?" The waiter's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked down, clearly unable to meet Warren's piercing gaze. The tension in the room was almost unbearable as Warren continued, his voice calm but unrelenting. "Judging someone by how they look or what you think they can afford isn't just unkind. It's ignorant," Warren said. "You don't know their story, and it's not your place to decide who belongs and who doesn't." The waiter's shoulders slumped, his earlier confidence now replaced by guilt. "I'm so sorry, sir," he mumbled. "I didn't mean to offend." Warren's expression softened slightly, but his words remained firm. "Apologies are a start," he said. "But what matters is that you learn from this. Treat every guest here with the same care and respect, no matter who they are. That's what makes a great establishment, and a better person." The waiter nodded quickly, his face still pale. "I understand," he said. "It won't happen again." Warren gave a slight nod, then turned his attention back to his wife. "Shall we order something more substantial?" he asked, his voice lightening as though the previous exchange had never happened. The woman smiled, her quiet strength shining through once again. "That sounds wonderful," she said. "But first, let's see if the waiter would like to recommend something." The subtle kindness in her words carried a weight that wasn't lost on anyone. The waiter straightened, his hands trembling slightly as he nodded. "Of course, ma'am," he said, his tone now respectful. "I'd be happy to." As he walked away to retrieve the menu, the room slowly began to buzz again, though the atmosphere had shifted entirely. Diners who had once judged the woman now avoided her gaze, their earlier whispers replaced by a quiet sense of shame. Others looked at Warren and his wife with admiration, their actions leaving a profound impression. At a nearby table, a man leaned toward his companion and whispered, "I'll never look at someone the same way again." That was humbling. Warren caught the comment and smiled faintly, turning to his wife. "I think we've made our point," he said softly, the hint of humor in his voice. "You always do," she replied, her eyes sparkling with warmth. The evening continued, but the lesson left behind lingered long after Warren and his wife had left the restaurant. The staff moved with renewed care, the diners spoke in hushed tones of reflection, and the waiter, humbled and chastened, carried himself with a new sense of purpose. As the evening wound down, the restaurant buzzed with a quiet yet palpable shift in energy. Warren and his wife continued their meal, enjoying the warm ambiance now tinged with reflection from all around them. The waiter, still visibly humbled, moved about with a newfound sense of care, not just to their table, but to every guest in the restaurant. His previous arrogance had been replaced with thoughtful precision, and every step he took seemed to carry the weight of the lesson he had just learned. When the couple finished their meal, Warren placed a generous tip on the table, far more than anyone expected. As they stood to leave, the waiter hurried back over, his face flushed with both gratitude and lingering guilt. "Sir, ma'am," he began, his voice shaky, "I just wanted to say thank you for giving me a chance to make things right. I've learned a lot tonight, and I won't forget it." Warren looked at him for a moment, his expression calm but kind. "That's good to hear," he said. "What matters isn't just what happened tonight, but how you carry this forward. Treat every person with respect, and you'll find that it comes back to you in ways you never expect." The waiter nodded fervently, his posture now far humbler than when the evening had begun. "I will," he promised. "Thank you again." Warren smiled, then turned to his wife. "Shall we?" he asked, offering her his arm. They walked out together, their unassuming presence leaving an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed the evening unfold. As the door closed behind them, the restaurant seemed to breathe collectively, the patrons exchanging glances that carried unspoken agreements to reflect on their own actions and judgments. Outside, the city lights cast a golden glow on the street as Warren and his wife strolled away. "You didn't have to say anything, you know," she said, her tone gentle but teasing. "I could have handled him." Warren chuckled, his eyes warm. "Oh, I have no doubt about that," he replied. "But sometimes it's about making sure everyone in the room learns the lesson, not just the one who made the mistake." She smiled, leaning into his arm. "Well, you certainly know how to make an impact." As they disappeared into the night, the legacy of their quiet grace and Warren's powerful words remained behind, a ripple effect that would linger in the hearts of everyone in the restaurant. The waiter, the diners, and even the staff learned that evening that respect isn't about status. It's about humanity. And somewhere down the line, when the waiter served his next guest, or a diner considered someone's worth, they would remember the night Warren Buffett and his wife taught them the simplest, yet most profound truth. Kindness and humility are the greatest currencies of all.